I just want to take a moment to say that the new Drake song is fire. And I am not a fan of this artist by any means. Uh, and I will probably forget about this song after a few days. But for right now, for the next couple hours, the new Drake song is fire. And I look exactly like the type of person who would utter that statement. I want to talk today about the woods, living in the woods, and how that affected my mindset, particularly towards other people and towards like communities writ large. Um, Even relatively small towns that I've lived in, that being towns of 10,000 people, give or take, sometimes, even less than that, they felt really busy. They felt really busy and full of life in a way that I'm not exactly used to because, as I showed in my video, I think it was called like random vlog I recorded in 2016. It had a title like that. I'll link it in the description. Um, I had this big property, well, my parents did, when I was growing up, in the woods. We sort of had neighbors just barely, but they were like separated by all these trees, and you could get up on a hill, and just look outward and see so many rolling hills before you and so many other trees, ostensibly on land that belonged to other people. But that was like my perception of what the world was like. And of course, I had encyclopedias, I had television, I had the internet, very slow internet, but I had it. And that, taught me what the rest of the world was like. We would go out into town, into some of the cities that you would get to after, going, and it would take a while to get into town, by the way, but you'd go into some of the cities that existed outside of town, and I was really disgusted with how they looked growing up. Not just because I felt like I didn't have any independence, because I had to sit in the car bored looking out the window for so long at all this stuff that looked boring and ugly, but also because when you would exit the car, there wasn't anything nice to see. It was all just gray, concrete strip malls and businesses that had seemingly been strip mined in the wake of the 2008 recession. They were shuttered, and sad people that, looked like they didn't have any purpose or um, anything going on in their lives. And I really felt that I didn't belong wherever I was. And I think what I didn't understand when I was a kid was how much I actually liked the house we had in the forest. Because I would get sad when we would go out into town or some of the outlying areas just by looking around me and by not having much independence. What I didn't realize was that the land that we had was really nice, the house that we had was really nice, and that by being secluded from everyone else, um, I was going to experience a kind of tranquility and relaxation that I wouldn't necessarily enjoy again. Um, and that became very obvious to me as I moved around the country and the world, even, and experienced some of these different places. Uh, it it hurt, it hurt to be away from there, as I came to find, um, because I didn't have the isolation, the quiet, the tranquility, the sense of safety that you have from being out, that far away from everything. Um, and I became more and more aware of the fact that interacting with other people makes me just extremely sad or annoyed or angry, um, or bored. It's like when I'm in an environment with other people around, um, it's like I can manage, I can appear like a normal person, like someone who, you know, is making nice or, functioning. But I'll hate every minute of it. I'll hate every minute of the interactions. Even if I'm really being myself, even if there's some things I like about the person, I just won't like the fact that I'm there. And I won't like the fact that I am, you know, existing in a social space. It feels right for me to be secluded, to be far away from everybody, and engaging in my interests, doing the things that I care about, connecting with people in a limited fashion, that being through the internet, and not really having to deal with people and all of their bullshit, you know. Um, it's this weird thing where it's just like, I find other people so frustrating. I find them so fake. I find them so frustrating. And it's like being around them just upsets me. It's like I consistently seem to have these reoccurring memories of times when I felt really bad. And all of those memories stem from times when I was around other people. And even, situations that, didn't necessarily involve me being abused or mistreated, um, will still feel like that, right? I'll have these flashbacks to those moments and just feel fucking awful, you know? Just because a person looked at me a certain way, or they expressed something a certain way, or, I could sort of sense that they were hiding something and I knew what it was, but, they were doing it anyway. Um, or, they had some sort of negative feeling toward me or something. It's just like, it's like I'll just be so frustrated with the event and uncomfortable with it, and sort of like unable or maybe unwilling to accept it, um, that it's like I end up feeling so much better when I'm just away from all of it. And it's weird because I've tried so many different times to put myself in situations with other people, and to change how I think about them. Working with a therapist, working with myself, working with others, to really change how I think about my interactions with other people. Um, and it hasn't worked, you know. It hasn't worked to expose myself more to these situations and to be in them constantly. It hasn't worked to reassess things and to try and change how I think. It's just made me feel worse to try and do that. And so there comes a point when you sort of realize, like, well, I'm not really meant to be in this social space. I'm not really meant to be in a community and to, um, have these robust relations and, to be in a town or a city, etc. I want to live in a rural community again and have my own place just sort of separate from everybody else, and not have to deal with all their nonsense. Um, it's like if I didn't have anything, no money, no anything, and I had to be homeless, I would be like one of those homeless woods dweller people. I would like have a tent in the woods or like build my own little place like way, way deep into the sticks where, those those Boy Scouts that they've got in the park rangers wouldn't be able to find me. And I would just fucking stay there, man. Just not talk to anybody, you know. Um, and it's because I really thoroughly cannot stand other people. Just as like a general thing. There's a couple individuals that I make exceptions for, or I like, or I mostly like, and our interactions work for me, which is really cool. But it's like so many people are just so judgmental. They're just so judgmental. They're so dishonest. They're so neurotic and full of all these different irritating feelings. Um, it's too much. It's really too much. Um, to be around, the kind of rudeness and anger that you see all throughout the world. Maybe not all throughout the world, all throughout this country, really. You know, I can't stand it. And, even like people who try to sort of portray themselves as nice or polite, they're still passive aggressive. They're still judgmental. I don't want to deal with any of that. Because even just like remembering those experiences or those interactions with people that, sort of seemed kind of like that, it just leaves such a bad taste in my mouth. I'll be doing some random thing, I'll remember them, and then I'll just feel terrible. You know, it's like I get those responses. I experienced that response because I had those interactions in the first place, because I was going through these periods of time where I was really just toiling away, trying to expand my horizons and become more social and become more accepting of this stuff. But it seems like I am just, for whatever reason, unable to accept this stuff. And like I can't, I can't fit in, right? I can't feel comfortable. I seem to just have this hatred of humanity. Not of humanity broadly speaking, but of these tendencies that are very, very present, in humans. I'm not tolerant of them. And I think other people are a lot more tolerant than me, and it bears well for them, but it's like, I don't know if you can necessarily force yourself to be a certain way. It's like you just sort of are what you are. There's like changes that you can make within that you can become better, but at some point you just are what you are. And it's like, I managed to find somebody that I'm in love with that doesn't make me feel like this. That's what's amazing about this. It's like, if I had to sit here and pontificate on how I could get myself into a community because I didn't have someone like that and I wanted to find one, then this would be a totally different video. But because I have someone that I've been able to rely on in this manner, and that really makes me feel like I can just be myself, and I can just do my own thing and sort of enjoy her presence and she can enjoy mine. I don't necessarily have to immerse myself into all of these people and their, the daily monotony of being around them. I can't stand socializing, man. I really can't. I seem to be at my best and my most stable when I am totally isolated from society and spending a lot of time to myself, but I still have close people like family, that I can interact with. And I don't think I need any more than that. When I have more than that, bad things happen. I end up feeling really bad. I find myself doing, bad things, manipulative things, just, out of boredom or frustration. I'm a lot more at peace and emotionally stable when I'm just totally away from that entire world, that whole social world. And it, partially could be a product of where I grew up, that very rural area, but also the fact that I didn't just grow up in a very rural area. I grew up in a very rural area, homeschooled and without any real community. But on top of that, I didn't have, the kind of familial interaction that a lot of other people have. I just stayed by myself most of the time. I just did things by myself. Even when, my mom would try to play with me or interact with me, sometimes I would insist on being by myself, which is, from what I understand, a pretty unusual behavior for a young child, but it was the behavior I exhibited. And this is something that I've tried to get to the bottom of for so many years on this channel, but I don't know if there's much else to say beyond um, I seem to have this preference for solitude, this inclination towards these isolated, wide open areas where other people are not present. That's part of why I liked COVID so much, which I think I could make a whole other video about. When the pandemic was going on, and all of the public spaces were empty, and all the airports were empty, that was the time when I felt like it was time to go traveling. That was the time when I felt like it's time to experience the world, because I didn't have to deal with other people's noise and their monotony and their stupidity. I could just exist, right? I could just exist and be comfortable and be calm. And that was a really nice thing. That was a really nice thing. And I miss that. I almost hope that there's another pandemic, selfishly, just so I can experience that again, And I think that's okay, right? I think it's okay to be, kind of a grumpy, isolated guy who, doesn't want, close relations from the world and from a lot of people. It's kind of the bed that I've made for myself, or perhaps that reality has made for me, because I was formed this way with these preferences. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's very late for me, and that I need to go to bed. But I also think that I needed to talk about this, because the longer that I've spent, in this room, or the past several months, and then the periods of time, where the intervals where I tried, to interact with people more and get out and interact, the more apparent these aspects of myself have become. It really just seems to make me feel awful to interact with so many different people. And there are those, couple ones that I don't have that reaction towards, and man, do I cherish them. That's why I've had so many of the same friends for so many years now. Most of my friends I've known for over 5 years. Why is that? Because they're the only people I can stand. It's like, so many people on the planet I just cannot stand, and some people are just like that. Some of them have signs outside on their lawn, and they say to stay the hell away. Some of them are young guys like me who are, probably way too grumpy for their age. But I think eventually we become those old guys. So, I don't know. Maybe this is also a somewhat American phenomenon, because, when the settlers came, a lot of them had the explicit goal of running away from the old world ties that they were inevitably leaving behind, and having new adventures and forming new connections and building a new life. Whereas, there, people's ancestry is rooted in thousands of years of history. And so I think there was almost like an inherently antisocial element to the formation of virtually all of the New World countries. That's something I can really identify with and relate to. And I think it explains, even certain like bad things about the U.S. in particular, like the U.S. and Canada actually, like single family zoning and all this nonsense. But that's like that's like antisocial in just like a stupid way, because like you know even countries with significant rural parts like Germany, for example, they still have train lines, and France, they have train lines that go to the rural parts and connect them to the rest. And I wish we had something like that. Um, but who knows? Maybe I'll live in like rural Iceland or rural Sweden or rural Germany or rural Spain or something like that. I know I don't want to stay in the United States. I've had the goal of leaving the United States for my entire life and living somewhere else. But that also necessarily means that I have to be willing enough to interact with people to have a nice job, um, and to have a nice job for long enough to acquire my own place to live in and acquire enough money to live off of after quitting, um, and then just working online or whatever. But I think that's something I'm working toward with my college degree, because I do intend to start going to college, um, ideally next year, if not sooner. Um, and once I see the fruits of that and the career that would stem from that, um, come about, I could then take those skills into the workplace and spend however many years it takes to get my own place, and not have to be so um, immersed in the world of everyday people. Uh, and so it's like I have certain goals, even though I'm aware of this preference that I have and of what I want. I have a goal to, you know, withstand them for long enough in order to get, a career going, and, to start working. It's like, it's not even like, it's not even like I can't do it, because I can. It's just I don't want to unless I'm working towards a greater thing. That's what's hard to explain about it, because you have people that, like, you know the reason why they isolate themselves is because they're scared of other people. That's not what my problem is. It's like my problem is just disliking them. It's just finding them frustrating. And if I can tolerate them for long enough in order to um, make these different developments monetarily, um, etc., uh, I could be in a much better position. And so, maybe there's an extent to which I can adapt my mindset in the workplace, just well enough in order to get the things that I want in the world. And that is still something that I'm working on. But the idea of having some big community where, I'm going out every day all the time, and it's all about that. And that's never going to be me. I'm never going to have that. I'm going to be that grumpy guy, in a rural area, um, with his family, but to himself. And I feel happy about that, because at least then I can pursue my interests. I don't have to feel grumpy or bothered, because the source of all of that is out there. The stuff that makes me feel that way is out there. I can instead just be happy, engaging in my interests and enjoying my life. So, we'll have to see what's up. We'll have to see what's up. But um, that's sort of the trajectory I'm on right now. I'm working to become, more stable and functional, with acquaintances and just the people that you're required to interact with. Um, And also, to reach a point, like financially, a point of independence where I can, be working online, um, where the interactions feel a lot less significant, and I can be, in my own, little place, isolated from the rest of the world, just enjoying Mother Nature and, the various things that I'm into. That's where I want to be at, once again.